We are so excited to have our guest today, Kiana Reeves, who in addition to having a long history of being a practitioner of sexual wellness, is the Chief Brand Officer for Foria.
I have to tell you, Rachel, I was so excited to speak to Kiana. And a little fun fact here. So a while back, when Foria was just getting started, I was so fascinated in this potential panacea for cramps, for pain, for sexual wellness, because I kept hearing all about it. But here in New York, it wasn't readily available. Thankfully, I had a really dear friend who went skiing in Colorado. And what does she bring back from me as a little gift? My first bottle of Foria that I could sample and try out and relate to my patients. So really psyched to speak to her.
Yeah, what I find so exciting, and we talk about this all the time, is how much companies are doing, and Foria is certainly one of the leaders in pushing forward conversations. Folks will hear today, we talk about anal play, we talk about comfort, we talk about consent, we talk about
anatomy. Yes. We talk about stages of the sexual response for women. We really covered so much with her and puts everything into perspective with the products that her company is.
And just like I always say about you, Kiana is a multiple threat. In addition to being a pelvic health therapist and a somatic sex educator. So she brings that caretaking wellness approach to her role. So I think people will learn a lot from listening to her today.
Welcome to the Business of the V. Hello, friends and colleagues. I'm Dr. Alyssa Dweck.
And I'm Rachel Braun-Sherrill. Each week, we bring you the most fascinating investors, inventors, entrepreneurs, academics, and healthcare practitioners who are making things happen in women's sexual and reproductive health.
If you are a woman, know a woman, have a business, or care about your V health and wellness, fasten your seatbelts and listen in to another informative and inspiring episode.
We are so excited to have today's guest. Kiana Reeves is the Chief Brand Officer of Foria and is yet another one of our guests who has so many different roles and ranges of experience. She's a somatic sex educator, a certified sexological body worker, a pelvic health practitioner, and a certified doula, and now is bringing all that knowledge and experience to bear in her role as Chief Brand Officer at Foria. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be having this conversation with you today.
We're thrilled to have you and to be on this call with you. And we've obviously both seen and watched and cheered on Foria's success. We always like to start with, and your answer is a little more obvious than most, is how you got from where you were, which was really education and hands-on work, to being a chief brand officer. What got you to Foria?
Yeah, it's a great question. What got me to Foria, I think there's a couple things. There was what got me into this place in the first kind of moment in my life very strongly was when I had my first son. And the identity shift from young woman into motherhood and how that changed my body and the way I related to it sexually in particular. And also the way that the world was relating to me as a sexual person who had a child. It's very different being like a young, youthful woman and then having a baby. So it brought up so much for me around sexuality. And I started my own business that was very much rooted in traditional pelvic healthcare practices from around the world and investigating their more traditional tools. And a lot of people question them. Some people love them. Some people are like, absolutely not. But the purpose of the business was to identify what have cultures done historically forever to support women after they give birth. And to
not.
Yeah, exactly. And so we were diving into that. And that's when I met our founder, Matthew Gerson, and our kind of paths collided. And he's like a genius inventor, right? Like he's this person who he always has fantastic ideas for products, and some of them work and some of them don't. And I came in with this background, birth work and being a doula for over a decade, and was really at that moment studying the somatic sexology work.
Explain to people, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Just explain to people what somatic sexology work is.
Right. So somatic sexology work is anatomical, pleasure-based, nervous system rooted embodiment, hands-on work on the body, understanding your genitals, understanding how your pleasure works, understanding your own sexuality, your own sexual pleasure through a felt experience of it, not just by talking about it, but really like hands-on mapping of the vulva, hands-on mapping of the penis, working with couples to facilitate that with each other, and really using the body's cues, the nervous system cues, to understand arousal, regulation, safety, pleasure, all of those things.
Interesting. So tell us about your journey with Matthew Gerson and products and how you got to where you are.
Yeah. So I joined and we had just launched our first arousal oil, and it was Awaken. And it was just like, we were starting to see, and what's cool about Foria is like the way that we've developed our products is really based on community feedback. Like, this is how it's working for me. And Awaken was such an exceptional product because it was really enhancing people's pleasure, and people of all ages were saying like, hey, I'm having incredible orgasms and I'm reaching a part of my arousal that I didn't even know was possible. When we started seeing these experiences from people, it was really life-changing experiences they were having. Everything from enhancing people's pleasure and experiencing first-time orgasms or multiple orgasms or new levels of arousal that really they didn't know were possible. And then there's this whole contingent of people, which I know that you're both familiar with, which is particularly women and people with vulvas who have discomfort or tension or, all sorts of different conditions within that range, whether it's hormonal or from pharmaceutical side effect or chemotherapy or anything. And what we were seeing there is just tremendous, tremendous benefit to their ability to access pleasure.
What is the secret sauce? I mean, obviously, I'm not asking you for the secret sauce.
Yeah.
But what is the secret sauce? I mean, I think people really want to know, as everybody is looking to enhance pleasure or diminish discomfort or bad sensation.
Yeah. So the secret sauce is a couple of things. It's not one like ingredient. The sauce is not the ingredient. The sauce is using a combination of really historically trusted, data-based, studied plants that are trustable in different ways and used historically in different ways on the body. And the idea is that if you enhance arousal, which is essentially blood flow to the pelvis, and you help the muscles there relax and you diminish inflammation in that area, your likelihood of experiencing pleasure is much, much greater. So the more arousal you experience, the better, the more resiliency you have in the tissues. And it's that combination that we go for all of our intimacy products. Are we hitting those marks? Is it enhancing pleasure? And is it diminishing people's discomfort?
Yeah. So in clinical practice, I find this to be incredibly helpful because I practice medical sex therapy, not somatic sexology, which I'm thankful that you're teaching me about.
Yeah.
One of the biggest complaints that I see is libido or sexual drive. And we know that this is a complex issue for women, but and there's so much psychological, emotional, physical that all goes into it. But we know that anxiety, inflammation, and discomfort are certainly part of this diminished libido. And that if we can improve those things, libido will naturally improve as a following event.
Right.
Do you feel like some of the ingredients in your products are really contributing to those factors? Is that what's data proven?
Absolutely. Yes. And what you're speaking to, we think a lot of the times that libido is like a feeling, right? And there's these two concepts. It's responsive desire, and it's the responsive desire is this idea that we are actually responding to inputs in our environment versus having this almost like impulsive on-demand desire that is shown in all of the movies. And we're really, really, really focused on the responsive desire piece of it with our products. So we're helping people respond when they might not feel like they're in the mood. They're responding to the sensations of their body, feeling relaxed, feeling pleasurable, feeling less stressed. And when they have those access points, there's not as much anxiety, because having painful experiences creates fear in your body. And of course, you're not going to want something that's, creating pain or discomfort. And so through the process of relaxation and that kind of natural feedback loop, we're really, really helping to support that natural kind of responsive desire that everyone can access.
When I first started on the business side of the space, a clinician gave us a very, for lay people, a very great discussion of female sexual response, which, as both of you know, is really a combination, an intersection of psychological, physiological, social, emotional, behavioral, contextual. And he described it this way, and I've always found it so useful. Think of female sexual response like getting on a bus. Some people don't want to get on the bus. That's lack of desire. Some people get on the bus and they don't really enjoy the ride. It's too fast. It's too slow. It's boring. It's bumpy. It's too flat. They feel like they've been there before. That's lack of arousal. And then some people never get to their ultimate destination, which is lack of orgasm. And if those three things aren't working, they're not running back to the bus station to figure out when is the next time to get back on. And the reason that I tell that is because, at least in my experience, from a business and communication perspective, people don't necessarily know the difference between desire and arousal. And the way you described it, that's probably okay, because sometimes your body starts first and your brain kicks in, or vice versa. And I would joke, if you're waiting for that perfect moment when the laundry is done and your to-do list is done and your kids are all being where you want them to, and your partner, if you have one, hasn't annoyed you, like if that's when you wait to engage in intimacy, it's like, once every 6 solar eclipses. So the idea of just making it more accessible, I really love that in your messaging.
Yeah, it feels really important. And you spoke to it so beautifully. It's that point where you put the intention to have a sexual experience, right? You maybe pick up a Waken or you pick up a lube, and your body starts to respond to the actual sensation of pleasure. And as soon as that kicks in, you're going to start seeing arousal, which isn't just in your genitals. Often it's a full body experience where you start to feel your own eroticism. And the fact that that can happen first physically is a really huge piece that people don't understand. Yeah.
One of the things I've heard you say many times, Alyssa, is this idea of use it or lose it. And that's a real thing. So I wanted you to explain to people who are listening why you say that from a medical perspective.
Well, actually, you really touch upon a quite the controversial subject right now, because we always in gynecology and in medicine use the adage, use it or lose it, meaning the less you use your vagina, the less you engage sexually, the less you will engage in future, because maybe the vagina will become drier, or maybe you will just feel like it's more painful after that. But it actually turns out that this is not necessarily the case, that I don't even want to call it rehabilitation, but you can revisit and rekindle the use, the function, and the pleasure that, a sexual activity or encounter can provide. So I think it's a double-edged sword. So here's today's hot flash. Studies have shown that CBD may help reduce chronic pain by affecting the endocannabinoid receptor activity of the brain, reducing inflammation, and interacting with neurotransmitters. My question for you is, how do you message this type of a product that contains, let's just say, CBD, to people who are really frightened of these ingredients in terms of, and a lot of this is just ignorance or lack of education around the subject matter, but people who are afraid they're going to somehow get addicted, or people who are afraid they're somehow going to become really wasted, for lack of a better term. How is that presented?
Yeah, that's a great idea. So we do it in two different ways. One is by being very education forward. We are always writing. We are always connecting with our customers and really getting to the core of what do these ingredients do? And why are they in here? And why are they valuable? And what's the impact and effect going to be? And another way we do it is we have an amazing customer happiness team where you can go right to the source, get a response from us day of, next day, like, is this going to intoxicate me? But the education we do around CBD is extensive. And CBD is not intoxicating, especially when you can test it and you have tests on your bottle and you have tests that they can link to with the QR code where they see there is no THC. So that delineation between CBD being a cannabinoid that is not intoxicating, that does have physiological effects and benefits on the body, is really important for people to understand. And then secondarily, we have started to offer products that don't have CBD in their formula, specifically for this reason, because the CBD hesitant or folks who are in the stage of their life that maybe CBD doesn't make sense to them, or people who are concerned about getting tested and just really, really want to make sure that they're not putting any hemp, any cannabinoids in their body that could absorb. So for those folks, we want our products to be as accessible as possible. And while CBD has always been this core ingredient in our formulas, we've worked with many botanicals over the last 10 years. And they're in many, many of our formulas, and they're beneficial and they're phenomenal. Kava is an example of them. Cacao is an example. So it's those different pathways, education, making sure we have products that are accessible, having a great customer resource team to answer people's unique and personal questions. Those are the three elements that we are really taking to make sure people feel comfortable.
Yeah, I'm so happy to hear that. Number one, because some products just aren't available in all states, which is limiting where I practice in New York. And number two, you mentioned your experience as a postpartum person. Mm-hmm. And these are incredibly heightened concerns for people who are lactating or people who just gave birth or whatnot. So that's
exactly. That's an example of a great community where we see the need so clearly. And many of us on the team are mothers and many of us are expecting. And so being able to say, sex gets very different after having a baby, whether you have a vaginal birth or a cesarean. And so being able to support people in that transition to a different kind of sexual experience and support them at that stage of life is so important. So Awaken Botanicals is a great example of, we took the CBD out, left all the other good stuff in. Yeah.
So in addition to creating conversations and providing options for people, in some of the areas that we talked about, you've also been out there talking about products that enhance anal play or anal pleasure, which is terrific. And we know that when we look at new data that people are choosing quite a bigger range of sexual activities. There's a greater frequency of trying anal sex or anal intimacy. So that's wonderful. I just read an article, and I'm sure you saw the same, that there were some thoughts that came out from the medical community that somehow the increase in anal play is dangerous for women's health. So I have two questions. One, I want to know from a medical perspective, Alyssa, what that means. Is it true? Is it real science? And then Kiana, from a Foria perspective, how you figured out how to talk about something that's so, I hate using the word taboo, but if sex is taboo, anal is taboo times 70.
Absolutely.
So, Alyssa, is there truth to that reporting that it's bad for women? And we know it more now because there's an increase in that kind of activity.
Look, I don't think we should call it bad or good. It's an individual choice. Number one, with anal play, consent is essential. So I think that's first and foremost to put out there. Number two, just anatomically, the anal opening and sphincter has much, much tighter tone than the vagina, especially if the vagina has been used before. So lubrication is absolutely essential, and lots of it. Oftentimes, I'll recommend a silicone lubricant for anal play because it is so slick and it is very long lasting in comparison to some of the water-based lubes out there. And I'm sure some of the Foria products are also quite helpful in this regard. A lot of women are interested in anal play because there is no chance of pregnancy during this type of sexual encounter. Others are going to say, this is not my cup of tea, and I never want to be involved in that. And so I think the dangers really come about on an individual basis.
Yeah, and I'll chime in too. I think something that we've spoken about before in our marketing and messaging is the vaginal microbiome and the anal microbiome are very different. And so one of the things that comes up quite a bit is when you're going from anal to vaginal play, you can have bacteria migrating that doesn't belong in the vagina, that can cause different types of infections. And so that's a key piece that we definitely educate around, is how do you safely engage in anal play? And the cool thing that I've wonderfully discovered as a sex educator, and we really work to message around, is anal play is a big range of opportunity. So it doesn't necessarily even mean penetration. It could be stimulation of the outer anus. There's two sphincters there, one that's very much governed by our own choice and our own body. You can open and close at will. And then the internal anal sphincter is actually governed by the autonomic nervous system. And so it requires, like, true pleasurable anal play and sexual pleasure requires a level of safety and relaxation, as you're speaking to consent here, that takes time. And so if you're going to go there, an orifice that is not self-lubricating, an orifice that takes a lot of time and relaxation and massage and being with the body to make sure that it feels really good, it can provide incredible opportunity for intimacy and communication. But it's not something to be rushed. And it's certainly something that both parties should explore together in a moment-to-moment agreement. How's this feeling? It's feeling really good, but I might need more lubrication. Just keeping it a conversation, especially the first few times. So that is how we approach our messaging too. We really take this informed consent, unshaming. I think that's the most important thing about all of our education, all of our communication to our community, is always about how can we invite people into an experience and have them feel open and curious and not judgmental. And that, I think, is informed obviously by my tone as a sex educator. I really have all my arms around all of the blogs, all of our emails, everything I review. I make sure they're factual and that they make people feel good, not scared, or they make people not feel overwhelmed, like, oh, I could never do that. That's like way too sexual. It's approachable.
Yeah. Well, people also don't want to feel judged. And
exactly.
I think that's a portion of it. The article that came out today in the British Medical Journal really was speaking to the point that clinicians don't typically feel too comfortable discussing this unless it's their wheelhouse. If somebody who's, trained in sexual medicine might feel comfortable, but your standard, let's just say, gynecologic visit may or may not touch upon this subject matter. So luckily, we're bringing it to top of mind.
Yeah. And we also know from many conversations we've had how subpar the education is around sexual wellness and intimacy. We've shared the statistics before that certainly not all states in the country even require sex ed. The ones that mandate it don't require it to be scientifically or medically accurate, which I've said that statement maybe 1,000 times over the course of my career. And every time I still can't believe it. We in many states, we teach abstinence, and in fewer states, we teach consent. So the language, and I think it was so clear when the two of you were talking about anal play, how important the vocabulary is and understanding what you can say, what you want to do, what you don't want to do, and being able to have a conversation about that. It's missing. And one of the great things about companies like yours is you're filling in that gap that people aren't getting and their parents didn't get and their grandparents didn't get growing up with the sex ed system that we have. And I know that's controversial and people feel differently about it. But what we do know is it's not sufficient, what we have right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you speak to a great point is we educate high schoolers, maybe, on sex ed, their anatomy, how to not get pregnant, STDs. And then there's no other formalized educational or resource opportunity for people to talk about these really deep, intimate questions around their body or their relationship or genuine sexual pleasure and the importance of that and the value of that in a partnership. And so we really, we know that people go to brands now for education, which is great for us because we're so happy to be a resource for that.
Yeah. And since the web is truly the wild, wild west, it's great to have reputable resources that we could point people in that direction for education.
Yeah. So you started out with CBD-based products, and now you've expanded to include products that don't all contain CBD, but still follow the standards that you set for the company. What can people expect coming down the pike next from Foria?
There's a lot in the pipeline. I think outside of our product formulations, what we're doing is we're really looking at this window between menses, menopause, and beyond. And where are the need states? Because what hasn't been done yet very well, and which is what I'd love for our company to be our North Star, is that the arc of the female body and all of these moments throughout our lifetime, from ongoing menstruation for decades to potential pregnancies, to breastfeeding, to childbirth, to postpartum, to maybe different types of medical conditions they may encounter, to perimenopause, to menopause, and then what happens beyond that. We are continually changing our bodies are continually changing. And to be a source of identifying those critical moments where there hasn't even been support, like postpartum, we can take that as a great example of this. Menopause is another great example of this. Period cramps are another great example of this. The half of the population is experiencing these things on an ongoing basis. And there are critical need sets here that absolutely have been unaddressed. And so taking that and going, there's a massive need here to have more support during this time of life. And not just like to meet your needs so that you're okay, but to meet needs so that people are enjoying a true quality of life that they deserve, the quality of their sexual experiences, the quality of their comfort of being in their body. That's the angle we're taking as we develop R&D for our products. So I can't announce anything in the pipeline, but that's the lens we're looking through, and we're very excited about that lens.
Well, they always say that imitation is the biggest form of flattery. So you guys were first at Foria, and obviously we've seen other lookalikes, if you will. Please tell our audience where they can find your products and all this great education.
Yeah, the easiest place is our website. So it's foriawellness.com, Foria wellness, WELLNESS.com. And then on social media, it's a really fun place to follow us. So that's just the @ symbol and then Foria Wellness on Instagram. And I would really encourage people to join our email list, because that is the place to get the kind of juiciest educational deep dives on all of these subjects. We focus on physical anatomy, we focus on biology, we focus on relationships, we do fun sex ed how-tos. And it's a really great kind of holistic approach to sexual wellness.
Great. Well, thanks so much for being with us.
We loved having you, and we appreciate everything you are contributing as a human and as part of this company to make these conversations easier. Because again, I'm a broken record, but with the vocabulary and with the ability to speak about it and ask questions, I think we have better results for everybody, for sexual beings, for health outcomes. And so keep up the good work. We'll be watching you.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Don't forget, Subscribe to our podcast at businessofthev.com for the latest trends and trendsetters in women's health and business.